My HOA neighbor hit my trash can 57 times with her luxury SUV, so I rebuilt it out of solid concrete. The next morning, she hit it again, and that one hit destroyed her car, her reputation, and exposed a $47,000 HOA scam. It started like every other Tuesday morning in Pinewood Gardens, a quiet, rule-obsessed HOA neighborhood just outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place where everyone waves at each other, but half of them are secretly reporting you for leaving your trash bin out 5 minutes too long. Every lawn on the block looked like a green carpet sample, trimmed to exactly 2.5 inches, per HOA guidelines. Even the mailboxes came in only 3 approved shades: sand beige, dusk taupe, and what they proudly called heritage almond. When I first moved here in 2020, I thought I'd found peace, a clean start, a chance to rebuild after a messy divorce. I'm Marcus Holloway, 45, an electrician by trade, a dad by heart, and a man who thought that buying a corner lot house with a decent yard and 2 bedrooms for my kids would mean stability. My daughter, Emma, 16, spends most of her time sketching and listening to music loud enough to wake the dead. My son Tyler is all energy and questions, the kind of kid who wants to know how everything works, from ceiling fans to the Wi-Fi router. We were the new faces on the block, polite, quiet, minding our own business. I fixed my fence, repainted the shutters, waved at the neighbors when I walked the dog. For the first couple of weeks, everything seemed fine. Then I met Brenda Whitmore. Brenda was 52, recently widowed, and the kind of woman who could turn a neighborhood barbecue into a zoning inspection. She had the kind of confidence that comes from years of middle management and a lifetime of getting her way. After her husband passed, she'd traded her downtown bank office for the cul-de-sac throne, the unofficial, self-appointed HOA Compliance Officer. That title doesn't actually exist in our bylaws, but Brenda carried it like a badge of honor. Clipboard in hand, pearl white Escalade polished to perfection, she made it her daily mission to patrol the streets at dawn, pointing out infractions to anyone who dared violate her unwritten code of perfection. She'd leave little sticky notes on mailboxes. Grass exceeds HOA standard, please mow promptly. Or, holiday decorations must be removed within 7 days post-holiday. She treated the neighborhood like it was her kingdom, and the rest of us were unruly peasants. Most people just ignored her or grumbled behind closed doors. I tried to stay neutral. I'd seen enough power-hungry personalities at job sites to know they usually implode on their own. Then came the trash can wars. By city ordinance, Columbus Municipal Code, Section 1305.05b, trash cans have to be placed within 3 feet of the curb on collection day. Simple, right? I'd even double-checked it after my first HOA meeting. The sanitation guys were friendly, the rule was clear, and I had no reason to think my neatly positioned bin would spark a suburban Cold War. But for Brenda, my trash can was apparently an affront to civilization itself. It started small. One Tuesday morning, I heard a loud crack, followed by the unmistakable clatter of plastic rolling down the driveway. When I rushed outside, still in my slippers, my garbage was scattered across the lawn. Cereal boxes, banana peels, coffee filters, the whole embarrassing buffet. Standing halfway down the street was Brenda in her gleaming Escalade, pretending to inspect her rearview mirror. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I thought these streets were narrow. Maybe she'd misjudged the turn. I cleaned up the mess, replaced the bin the next day, and moved on. But the next Tuesday, it happened again. Crack. Same sound, same timing, same Escalade disappearing around the corner. By the 3rd time, I was sure it wasn't coincidence. By the 5th, my kids had turned it into a grim sort of ritual. "Dad, she's coming," Tyler would whisper from the window at 6:15 a.m. Emma would roll her eyes but still peek through the blinds. And sure enough, Brenda's SUV would creep around the corner. her headlights cutting through the early morning fog. Then, like clockwork, boom! Another $23 trash can from Home Depot reduced to shards. 57 hits, Emma eventually counted one morning in mid-September, sipping her cereal like she was keeping score at a demolition derby. At first, I laughed it off, but as the weeks passed, that laugh started tasting bitter. Every broken bin was another reminder that this woman was going out of her way to mess with me, and she was doing it in front of my kids. You see, the thing about being a dad, especially after a divorce, is that your home becomes sacred ground. It's the one place you can prove to your children that they're safe, that you've got things under control. Watching Brenda casually crush my property again and again made me feel powerless, and that wasn't a feeling I could tolerate for long. I tried confronting her politely. One afternoon, as she was on her usual patrol, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched like armor, I walked over to her and said, "Hey Brenda, I think there's been a mix-up. My trash can's been getting hit pretty often and—" She interrupted before I could finish, her voice dripping with condescension. "Marcus, maybe you're not used to HOA living yet. These streets were designed for compact vehicles. Perhaps try adjusting your placement timing. It's safer for everyone." She smiled sweetly, but her eyes told another story, a quiet satisfaction that said she knew exactly what she was doing. I wanted to argue, but there's no reasoning with someone who treats a cul-de-sac like the Supreme Court. So I nodded, went inside, and started doing my research. I pulled up every HOA bylaw, every local ordinance, every traffic code. Turns out my placement was perfectly legal. The HOA rules said trash cans couldn't be visible from the street except on collection day. Check. The city law said within 3 feet of the curb. Check. The HOA's authority, according to the Ohio Revised Code Section 5112.14, meant once that can hit the curb, it was public right-of-way. Brenda was breaking the law, not me. By the end of September, I'd replaced 4 trash cans at $23 each. My driveway looked like a plastic graveyard. Emma started jokingly calling it the bin cemetery. But underneath the humor, I saw the worry in her eyes. Tyler asked if we might have to move again. That hit harder than any SUV bumper. So I set up my Ring doorbell camera with a perfect view of the curb. If Brenda wanted to keep playing demolition derby, she was about to be the star of her own reality show. That next Tuesday, I woke up early, brewed my coffee, and waited. 6:14 a.m. The neighborhood was quiet. Dew on the grass, birds chirping, the faint hum of garbage trucks in the distance. Then headlights. Her Escalade rounded the corner, that smug expression lit by dashboard glow. She lined up like a golfer taking aim at a tee. And boom! The Camry caught it perfectly. The crunch of plastic, the jolt of impact, the pause, and then her peeling away like nothing happened. I replayed it 5 times before I even finished my coffee. That footage was my line in the sand. I emailed it to the HOA board, attached a copy of the city ordinance, and politely requested that Brenda cease intentional property damage. No threats, no anger, just facts. The response? A formal notice from the HOA president, Gerald Thornfield, saying I was in violation for creating obstructions on community thoroughfares. They fined me $50 per day until the hazard was removed. I stared at that letter for a good 10 minutes before laughing, the kind of laugh that comes from disbelief rather than humor. Brenda wasn't just some nosy neighbor with a clipboard. She had the board in her pocket. So I did what any electrician who's tired of short circuits would do. I started troubleshooting the whole system. I printed every ordinance, documented every hit, time-stamped every video clip. Mrs. Olivia, my elderly neighbor across the street, even confirmed that Brenda had intentionally driven close to my bin. "She takes long way around," she told me in her soft, careful English. "Always. Only near your house she'd drive close. By the end of September, I had a binder thick enough to choke a horse. But paperwork wasn't enough. I wanted this to stop physically. I wanted Brenda to realize that bullying wasn't without consequence. Every Tuesday morning had become a ritual of tension. The sound of tires, the metallic scrape of a bumper, the clatter of garbage on asphalt. I could feel my patience cracking right alongside the plastic. And that's when the idea began forming. Slow, steady, dangerous. If she loved hitting trash cans so much, maybe it was time she met one that could hit back. 57 cans destroyed, hundreds of dollars wasted, and a neighborhood silently watching from behind their curtains. Brenda thought she was untouchable, the queen of compliance, above every rule The first clip played, grainy night footage from my Ring doorbell. Brenda's Escalade creeping down the street at 6:15 a.m. Thunk. The trash can barely moved, her bumper folding in slow motion. Another clip followed, then another. 57 collisions, each one time-stamped, labeled, and neatly logged. The room gasped. Someone in the back muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Then I switched to the next slide, bank statements. The projector illuminated the numbers on the wall like courtroom evidence. $47,000 in HOA payments to Whitmore Construction, LLC, a company registered to Brenda and her brother-in-law. I highlighted each contract, each approval signed by Brenda herself and co-signed by Gerald. This, I said, pointing to the final slide, isn't about trash cans. It's about corruption, harassment, and a woman who used her HOA to control, intimidate, and profit off her neighbors. I could feel the energy shifting. People started whispering, shaking their heads. The same folks who'd once been too scared to question Brenda now looked furious. Then I switched to the next slide, the police report. This, I continued, is from Officer Derek Martinez of the Columbus Police Department. It confirms that a GPS tracker was found under my work truck, an act of stalking and illegal surveillance punishable under Ohio Revised Code 2907.08. That device was professionally installed, and according to the ongoing investigation, the payments for it were made from an account linked to Whitmore Construction. Brenda's head snapped up. She started shaking her head violently, whispering to Gerald, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the carpet. Right on cue, the doors at the back of the room opened. In walked Officer Martinez, uniform crisp, folder in hand. The cameras swung toward him as the crowd murmured. He didn't hesitate. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice echoing off the walls. Brenda froze. "I have a warrant to serve regarding charges of insurance fraud and criminal mischief." The room erupted. Applause, gasps, even a few cheers. I'll never forget the look on Brenda's face, drained of all color, her mouth slightly open, eyes darting between the cameras and the officer. She looked like a trapped animal, cornered by her own arrogance. Gerald tried to stammer something about due process and procedure, but no one was listening. Reporters were snapping photos, neighbors were clapping, and Brenda was being handed official paperwork by the same officer she had once dismissed as unnecessary law enforcement presence in a private community. When the noise finally died down, I returned to the podium. Every homeowner in Pinewood Gardens deserves transparency and fairness. Our dues shouldn't be lining someone's personal bank account. This neighborhood was built on trust, and it's time we took it back. It wasn't a speech I'd rehearsed, but the words came out smooth and certain. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired and relieved. The meeting ended in chaos. Brenda left first, escorted by Officer Martinez. Gerald followed, red-faced and sweating. The rest of us stayed behind, buzzing with shock and adrenaline. People were hugging each other, laughing nervously, and taking photos of my concrete trash can, which I had brought as a prop and placed proudly near the podium. Someone even patted it like it was a good dog. 2 weeks later, Brenda resigned from the HOA board. Her resignation letter was short, 2 sentences, blaming a toxic community environment and false accusations. No one bought it. The same week, she settled the civil suit for $12,000, paid directly to me and my attorney for damages and harassment. But that wasn't the end of it. The newly appointed board president, Patricia Lopez, didn't waste time. She ordered a full forensic audit of HOA finances going back 2 years. What they found was even worse. Dozens of unapproved transactions, inflated invoices, and maintenance contracts that led straight back to Brenda's personal accounts. Within a month, every homeowner in Pinewood Gardens received a refund check of $370, their share of the recovered funds. The local papers picked it up first, then the TV stations. The headline on Channel 7 read, "Concrete Justice. Homeowner's Revenge Exposes $47,000 HOA Scam." The story went viral online, Reddit threads, Facebook groups, even TikTok videos. People everywhere were sharing the clip of Brenda's Escalade hitting my concrete can, set to every song from Eye of the Tiger to Highway to Hell. By February 2024, the Ohio HOA Accountability Office had announced new oversight measures modeled after Patricia's reforms. She called it the Pinewood Transparency Act, a set of internal bylaws requiring open financial reporting, third-party audits, and mandatory recusal for board members with conflicts of interest. For the first time in years, Pinewood Gardens felt like a community instead of a battlefield. Neighbors started coming out more. Barbecues returned. The kids played in the park again. People laughed about the concrete can legend, but behind the humor was real gratitude. We'd faced something ugly and won. By March 2024, the state's fraud case against Brenda was still pending, but her reputation was done. She moved out quietly one weekend, her once pristine Escalade sold off to pay legal fees. No one waved goodbye. As for me, my infamous concrete trash can became something of a landmark. The HOA voted to place it in the community center lobby as a permanent display, with a small bronze plaque that read, "Property Rights Protected, 2023. Every time I walked past it, I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about principle, and proof that ordinary people could stand up to corruption and win. That summer, we held the first Concrete Day, a neighborhood festival celebrating fairness, good neighbors, and accountability. There were bounce houses, barbecue competitions, and even a small scholarship raffle for local high schoolers. Someone printed shirts that said, "Got concrete?" and they sold out within an hour. As the sun set over the newly repaired playground, funded entirely from recovered HOA money, I watched Emma and Tyler playing with their friends, laughing freely for the first time in months. My daughter caught me watching and grinned. "Dad, who knew a trash can could change everything?" I laughed, shaking my head. Sometimes it just takes the right kind of garbage to clean up the neighborhood. She rolled her eyes, but I saw the pride there. That night, as I walked home through the quiet streets of Pinewood Gardens, porch lights twinkling like stars, I realized the real victory wasn't the money or the headlines. It was knowing that people like Brenda could be beaten, not by shouting, not by stooping to their level, but by standing firm and letting truth, patience, and a little bit of concrete do the work. Because in the end, the best way to fight back isn't always with anger or revenge. Sometimes, the best way to fight back is with concrete evidence. A year later, the neighborhood is peaceful again. The kids laugh, the lawns are green, and that concrete trash can still stands, not just as revenge, but as a reminder. Sometimes the smallest battles uncover the biggest truths. Because in this world of fake rules and real bullies, the best weapon you can have is evidence and the courage to use it. Hit that like button if you believe karma never misses, and subscribe for more stories where justice always hits harder than concrete. She didn't hesitate. The SUV accelerated. Funk! The sound was glorious, a deep, solid note that echoed through the neighborhood. No plastic crunch this time, just the dull, unforgiving collision of metal and stone. Her running board folded like tin foil, the Escalade jolted backward, and the look on her face, pure confusion. For the first time in months, she didn't look in control. I stood there, watching from behind the curtain, sipping my coffee like a man enjoying a symphony he'd composed himself. Then, unbelievably, she put it in reverse, straightened the wheel, and tried again. Thunk. The second hit was even louder. Her front bumper cracked clean off, skidding a few inches down the pavement like a dropped helmet. My concrete can didn't move, not an inch. Brenda just sat there, staring at it, for 30 long seconds. Her engine idled, exhaust puffing into the cold November air. I half expected her to get out, inspect the damage, maybe even apologize. But no, she backed up, turned sharply, and drove off like nothing happened. Except this time, she didn't get away quietly. By noon, half the neighborhood had heard about it. Mrs. Olivia called me first. "Marcus," she whispered, voice trembling with a mix of fear and amusement. "She hit your trash can again, but this time the car broke." Then Jim Torres texted me a photo of Brenda's Escalade parked crookedly in her driveway, bumper hanging by a single screw. Word travels fast in an HOA. By the end of the day, everyone knew about the trash can that fought back. That night, I replayed the doorbell camera footage over and over. Each impact, each frame of her bewildered expression, pure justice. I uploaded the clip to a private cloud, labeled it Evidence, Impact Number 1. For the first time since this mess started, I actually slept through the night. The next morning, my can still stood proud, a monument to physics and patience. Brenda's Escalade, on the other hand, had a missing bumper, a shattered fog light, and what looked like a dented running board. She drove past slower than usual, glaring at me through her tinted window, probably wondering what kind of witchcraft had turned my $47 trash can into a suburban tank. I just smiled and waved. In a neighborhood obsessed with conformity, where everyone's afraid to make noise, that little gray trash can became something bigger, a quiet act of rebellion. A reminder that sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to build something she can't break. And from that day on, Pinewood Gardens would never look at garbage day the same way again. The trash can war had started as a battle of pride, but by December 2023, it had turned into something much darker. Something that felt less like neighborly drama and more like a criminal investigation unfolding in real time. Brenda's Escalade had taken a beating. By my count, she'd hit my concrete trash can 7 times before finally realizing it wasn't going to shatter like the old plastic ones. The last collision had bent her bumper, cracked her grill, and cost her over $1,200 in repairs. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. I thought that after paying that bill, she'd finally leave me alone. But Brenda wasn't built to quit. She switched tactics. A week later, I got a call from the State Farm investigator. He sounded amused, like he was barely keeping a straight face. "Mr. Holloway," he said, just confirming, "do you own a reinforced trash can at your property?" I hesitated. "Yes. Why?" "Well," he continued, chuckling, "we received a claim for road hazard damage from a Mrs. Brenda Whitmore. She says her vehicle struck an obstacle in the roadway." I pulled up my Ring camera footage right then and there and sent it over. It showed everything in crystal clear 1080p. Brenda intentionally lining up her SUV, ramming into my trash can not once, but twice, and then driving off. The investigator called me back later that afternoon, still laughing. "Sir, this isn't a road hazard," he said. "This is self-inflicted destruction. The claim's being denied, and our fraud department is opening a file." That denial must have hit her like a ton of bricks, because within days the harassment started again. Only this time, she'd turned up the volume. First came the fake HOA citations. I got 3 in 1 week. Grass height exceeding approved limits, unauthorized exterior modifications, and even non-compliant mailbox color. The absurd part? My grass was mowed to regulation height. My mailbox had been the same color since move-in day. And the only modification I'd made was replacing a light bulb on my porch. Then came the anonymous complaints to the city. Apparently someone, I wonder who, had reported me for constructing an unpermitted concrete structure on residential property. I opened the door one Thursday morning to find a city building inspector standing in my driveway, clipboard in hand. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Holloway," he said with an apologetic shrug. "Got an anonymous tip about possible code violations. Mind if I take a look?" I led him to the curb, where my perfectly legal trash can stood like a small monument to spite. He looked it over maybe 20 seconds, tapped it with his pen, and smirked. "It's a trash can," he said flatly. "Not a foundation. No code violation here. Some people need new hobbies." I thanked him, but as he drove away, a chill ran down my spine. Someone, Brenda, was watching closely enough to trigger these inspections. She'd moved from petty to personal. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a Friday evening. I'd just gotten home from a long day rewiring a restaurant downtown. As I was unloading tools from my work truck, Tyler called out, "Dad, there's something weird stuck under your truck." I walked over, crouched down, and froze. There, magnetized to the frame, was a small black device with a blinking red light. A GPS tracker. I didn't touch it right away. My hands were shaking. I took photos from every angle, then carefully removed it with gloves and drove straight to the Columbus Police Department. The officer on duty, Direct Martinez, examined the device and nodded grimly. "Yep, that's a tracker. Professional grade, probably a $300 model. Did you authorize anyone to install this?" I hesitated. "No, but I can guess who did." He sighed, jotting down notes. Under Ohio Revised Code Section 2907 Tax 08, this falls under illegal surveillance and harassment, stalking, potentially. We'll open an investigation. I drove home that night with a knot in my stomach. This wasn't just neighborhood bullying anymore. This was criminal. The next morning I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why go to extremes? Why spend months terrorizing me over a trash can? What was she really protecting? That question lit a spark. If Brenda was willing to risk stalking charges, maybe she had more to lose than I realized. So I started digging. Not in my yard this time, but in public records. Every HOA in Ohio is legally required to post annual budgets and vendor payments online under Ohio Revised Code Section 5312.06. Most residents never bother to look, but I did. I spent 2 nights scrolling through minutes meetings, contract bids, and payment logs, and then I saw it. A company name that popped up again and again. Whitmore Construction, LLC. I froze. Whitmore, as in Brenda Whitmore. I opened the state business registry. Sure enough, it listed Brenda Whitmore as part owner and Richard Whitmore, her late husband's brother, as managing partner. The company had been formed just 6 months earlier, right before the HOA started approving a flurry of new maintenance projects. The totals were shocking. Nearly $47,000 in payouts for landscaping, fence repairs, sidewalk maintenance, and even repainting the community sign. Every single contract was approved by President Gerald Thorolfield and Brenda. The timing lined up perfectly. Brenda's harassment of me had started right after I'd raised questions about rising HOA dues at a September board meeting. I remember asking why our maintenance expenses had nearly doubled since the previous quarter. Brenda had smiled that same tight smile and said, "Transparency is always important, Marcus." Now I knew what she meant. She wasn't protecting community standards. She was protecting a personal cash flow. I printed everything: company registration forms, bank payment summaries, meeting minutes. It filled an entire binder. Then I backed it all up on 2 USB drives and emailed copies to myself. I wasn't about to let her gaslight me again. I blinked. Placement timing? That was her solution? Move my can at a different time so she could keep mowing down my property at her convenience? Her words were soaked in fake courtesy, but I could hear the condescension underneath. That little smirk that followed? That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a game to her. I swallowed my frustration, nodded, and said, "Sure thing, Brenda. I'll look into it." But inside, I was already thinking, you picked the wrong neighbor. That placement timing phrase became her favorite weapon. She started using it in emails to the board, casual conversations with other neighbors, even in the Nextdoor app posts where she disguised gossip as community safety concerns. Within a week, everyone on Maple and Elm knew Marcus's trash can blocks traffic. Then, like clockwork, the letter arrived. Thick envelope, certified mail, HOA letterhead. The kind that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. Improper trash receptacle placement causing a traffic hazard. The letter quoted HOA Regulation 4.7.3, no obstruction of vehicular pathways. Penalty, $50 per day until remedied. It was absurd. My can was placed exactly where the city required, within 3 feet of the curb, just like the sanitation department had instructed me when I moved in. But logic didn't matter when Brenda was running the show. She'd gotten her best friend, Gerald Thornfield, the HOA president, to sign off on it. Gerald was in his late 60s, a retired insurance adjuster with a permanent frown and a talent for avoiding eye contact when things got uncomfortable. Brenda and Gerald were like a 2-person bureaucracy machine. She made up the rule, he rubber-stamped it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the letter spread out in front of me like it was a crime scene. My daughter Emma peeked over my shoulder. "Another one?" she asked. "Yep," I muttered. "Apparently the trash can is a public menace now." Tyler looked up from his phone. "You should make it out of titanium next time." I smiled, but my patience was running thin. This wasn't about trash anymore, it was about control. So I decided to fight back, not with anger, but with paperwork. I opened my laptop and started digging. Every HOA has bylaws, and every bylaw has limits. Somewhere in that legal jungle, I was going to find her weak spot. 2 hours later, I found it. Ohio Revised Code 5312.14. The section was crystal clear. Homeowners associations cannot enforce rules or exercise authority over property that lies outside a homeowner's lot boundary. In other words, and this part made me grin, the 3 feet of curb space was public right-of-way property. Brenda's jurisdiction ended where my grass met the sidewalk. Once that can hit the curb, it was officially city property territory, which meant that every letter, every fine, every smug warning she had handed me was legally worthless. I leaned back in my chair, smiling for the first time in weeks. Translation? She had no authority. Game on. The next morning, I printed out a copy of the city ordinance, highlighted the relevant section, and taped it right to the side of my trash can, laminated just in case she decided to ram it again. Beneath the text, I added a bright yellow sticky note.
Placed in accordance with City Code 1305.5b. Have a great day. When Brenda passed by on her morning patrol, she slowed down, squinting at the can like it had personally insulted her. She didn't say a word, but I saw the twitch in her jaw. By the end of the day, I knew the war had officially begun. That evening, while I was grilling dinner for the kids, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. The subject line read, "Notice of ongoing violation. Urgent compliance required." Brenda had doubled down. The email was a masterpiece of bureaucratic nonsense, references to community harmony, vehicular safety, and ongoing noncompliance, all dressed up in polite phrasing, but dripping with spite. She even included a link to the HOA's online payment portal for fines, as if I'd just hand over money for the privilege of being harassed. I laughed out loud, shaking my head. If she wanted to play by the rules, I'd play by all of them. Every line, every code, every statute she conveniently ignored. So, I sent a reply, short and sweet. Dear Board, I appreciate your concern for community safety. However, under Columbus Municipal Code 1305.5b and Ohio Revised Code 5312.14, my trash receptacle placement is fully compliant. The HOA has no jurisdiction over public right-of-way property. Respectfully, Marcus Holloway. No threats, no insults, just cold, professional facts. I hit send and sat back imagining Brenda's face as she read it. That was the first time I realized something about people like her. Bullies don't expect resistance. They count on compliance, on people being too tired or intimidated to fight back. I wasn't either of those things. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. No letters, no knocks on the door, no plastic crunching at dawn. For a brief moment, I thought maybe she'd backed off. Then, on Friday morning, I opened my mailbox and found a new envelope, too thick, with "Second Notice" stamped on red across the top. Brenda wasn't backing off. She was just regrouping. Inside was a revised violation letter, this one accusing me of creating neighborhood discord through intentional provocation. Intentional provocation for following city law. I laughed, but it wasn't the amused kind. It was the kind of laugh that bubbles up when you know you're past the point of no return. If Brenda thought I was going to roll over, she was about to find out what happens when an electrician decides to start reading law books. Because now I wasn't just defending a trash can, I was defending principle. And the thing about principle? It's a lot harder to crush than plastic. My light bulb moment didn't come in a courtroom or from some fancy lawyer. It came over a lukewarm coffee at the contractor's counter inside Home Depot. I was venting to my buddy Dale Kowalski, a concrete guy. I'd known him for years. The man's been pouring driveways longer than I've been wiring houses. I told him about the fines, the broken trash cans, the absurdity of it all. Dale just listened, stirring his coffee with a paint stick like he always did, until he finally said, "You know, Marcus, nothing in Columbus City Code says what material a trash can has to be made of." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He leaned back and grinned that old contractor grin, the kind that usually precedes bad ideas or brilliant ones. "Plastic, metal, concrete, doesn't matter. As long as it meets the city's height and volume requirements, you're golden." I just stared at him for a second. Concrete. It was such a ridiculous thought that it looped back around to genius. Brenda wanted a war over trash cans? Fine. I'd build a trash can she couldn't destroy if she tried, and I had the receipts, codes, and ordinances to prove it was 100% legal. That night, my garage became a construction site. The smell of wet cement filled the air as I mixed 60 pounds of Quikrete, the sound of the trowel scraping against the bucket echoing off the walls. I built a steel rebar skeleton for reinforcement, poured the mix into a custom mold, and let it cure under heat lamps overnight. I even drilled proper drainage holes at the base to meet sanitation requirements. From the outside, it looked like any other city-issued container. The same black lid, the same handle, the same serial sticker I'd peeled off an old one for authenticity. Cost? $47. Result? A fortress. By November 7, 2023, it was ready. A gray, unassuming masterpiece of suburban engineering. I wheeled it to the curb just before dawn, placing it exactly within 3 feet of the curb, per Columbus Municipal Code 1305.5b. Every inch was legal. Then I waited. At 6:15 a.m. sharp, I heard it, the low growl of Brenda's pearl-white Escalade, rolling down Maple Court like a lion on the hunt. My coffee cup trembled in my hand as she slowed in front of my house. Even from the window I could see her smirk, that smug, satisfied expression she always wore before another round of destruction.